All right. Thank you so much, Darby. It is such a pleasure to be joining this year's Women's Virtual Summit. And today, our topic is embracing AI as you navigate your career journey. Now, we know that it's critical to really lean in and adopt AI. It is transforming every team, every profession, every industry. Bid and proposal is no exception. But to do that really well, we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I'll just raise my hand as someone who has perennially suffered from imposter syndrome. That's hard. And I think it can be really hard when things are changing. And again, personally, I've never seen something change so much in my lifetime. Now, I love that the topics today generally are really honing in on changing our mindset, advocating for ourselves, helping each other really navigate our careers and get in the driver's seat. And all of those themes are so relevant to the discussion today. Kate and Becky bring a wealth of experience and incredible perspective to this topic. So we're really going to dive in and talk about how they're personally using AI, what they're seeing across their team, how they're helping their teams embrace it. Then we'll talk about some of what they're seeing in the way in which they're seeing the profession evolve, even seeing roles evolve in their organizations as they really lean in and adopt AI. Now, the other thing we'll focus on is really that piece around how we get comfortable being uncomfortable. This is hard. How do we lean on each other? How do we dive into the deep end together? And what are some of the unique challenges that we might face as women in our organizations as we stay on this path and really try to figure out AI? So, without further ado, I'd love to have our esteemed panelists provide a little more background on themselves, their roles, their organizations. And Kate, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so hi everybody. As Darby had introduced us, I work for Dayforce, which is a global technology company in the HCM space. So Dayforce is a global people platform for HR, payroll, talent, all in one place. We have about 30 people across the globe in the different regions that we operate in, working on 1,000+ RFPs, RFIs, RFQs each year in the HCM space. And we also maintain a global library where we leverage responsive across our multiple products around the globe.
Amazing. Becky, what about you?
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I'm Becky Beard. I lead the global proposals function at Qualtrics. Qualtrics is an experience management platform, which in layman's terms is essentially surveys. If you've ever interacted with a company or your own company and taken a survey to talk about your experience, you've likely taken a Qualtrics survey. Our global proposals team is comprised of 10 members around the world. Our team has proposal managers, proposal coordinators, and content managers.
Excellent. Thank you for that context. It's great to understand really the global reach and impact of your teams. Now, with that, let's just dive right into the deep end. We'll start with this one. Often I think we hear there are these corporate mandates or initiatives to adopt AI. And I'd love to just understand, what does that look like in your organizations? And maybe Becky, you can kick us off on this one.
Yeah. So it was a slow start in the beginning. I think as everyone was skeptical at first. And then all at once, we sort of went all in and then quickly realized we needed to take a step back and think about how we can leverage AI in a thoughtful way. The fact of the matter is, like, once we went all in and just started blindly using it, we found that hallucinations in AI, hallucinations means AI, if it can't find an answer to a question, it still feels, well, does it feel? It feels compelled to still answer the question. And so it will make that up. It will make up an answer. For us specifically, we've found our AI will create its own company policies if it can't find one that it currently exists. And we quickly came to understand that AI is a tool to be leveraged, but it's not a replacement for our day-to-day work. Our company specifically has a mandate to embrace AI and find ways to make our teams more effective and efficient. We have done that to the best of our capabilities and are definitely open to continuing to find more gaps that it can fill.
Yeah, I love that view that, you went in and started using it, but I think, what this tells me is it is a bit of a just do it, but it sure won't be perfect when you start. And you'll learn a lot from that. And I think as a proposal professional, you've got a very unique view on where the risk lies and how you need to control for that. So it's great to hear that. Kate, I think you've got a bit of a different view on the mandate topic, so I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, for us, we didn't have a mandate, but it's certainly widely explored at our organization. And we did very early on have policy and guideline about how and when we could use AI. So, and what the procurement process would look like in those sorts of situations. But for me, it was a must. Like, we're being asked to scale, and we're growing, and we can't always just add people to that problem. So for us, it was, how can we embrace AI, and what are the different ways that we can use it to really scale and make things better for our people and keep people at the center of it, and see how it's going to aid them in their day-to-day.
Absolutely. And I'm sure folks are eager to understand how you're using it, et cetera. But, just to capture some of what you're saying, I think it's like, whether or not your company says you should do it, like, you're feeling it, you're intrinsically motivated to adopt it, because it really isn't even a choice anymore. It's that perennial, more with less, and then what? And I think there's a lot of power in AI to really transform the way that your team is operating. And so you've taken it upon yourself to really figure that out.
Yes.
Now, I want us to consider this stat, and we'll riff on this a little bit. So according to a recent study from the Slack Workforce Lab, men aged 18 to 29 are 25% more likely to have experimented with AI than their female counterparts. So this is a women's virtual summit, so I think we need to talk about this. I would love to understand how you're seeing this dynamic play out across your teams. Like, does this data in the study, support kind of what you're seeing on the ground floor? And, really, what are the differences that you're seeing in the ways in which women versus men approach or adopt AI?
So when I think about this question, I can't help but to also think of another statistic, which is, according to Forbes, 75% of female executives experience imposter syndrome. Jennifer, you started this conversation by mentioning that yourself. And from my experience, that is no different from folks on the front line. And in my experience and with my team, I find that the senior women on my team and people in my social circles that are proposal managers or in different roles find AI threatening in a way that links sort of inherently to the idea of imposter syndrome. There's hesitation because of the thought that kind of exists within women that we're not in our, like, we don't deserve where we are. We don't, we're just, I say it almost every day, I'm 3 muskrats in a trench coat, and so the idea of women being more hesitant to embrace technology, I find comes along with this idea of, I am 3 muskrats in a trench coat, just pretending to know what's going on. I'm just a baby is something we say on our team all the time. And I feel like as women and as we're embracing this change, like, we need to step up and take it on rather than kind of fearing it. But we also need to challenge these internal fears and self-deprecating emotions.
I have never heard three muskrats in a trench coat, and I think I'm going to use that um, we'll dig into this a little, maybe not that piece, but I want to come back to once we hear Kate's perspective on this, like kind of the so what, because I think there's some things that maybe you're doing to help your team, lean in more. But Kate, what are you seeing on your team?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that Becky is talking about ring true for us as well. I think a lot of the women on my team are very more tenured, candidly, and have a lot of experience in a process that works for them. So sometimes change is hard in that sense, and embracing something new, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think there's certainly, and I'll be candid, I initially, when I saw what ChatGPT could do, I was a bit worried about replacement for myself, for my team. I've since, I know that we're not there. And I think it really will just be an evolution, but I think that can be an initial fear that makes us resistant to embracing that technology. And, when you think about it, and then of course, early on with ChatGPT and some others, there were some very public issues that happened with companies using ChatGPT. So wanting to go about it in the right way sometimes can just lead to avoidance, I think.
Yeah. I know I promised I wouldn't give you a ton of pop fly questions, but I'm curious, like, because I think we're all saying, like, we're all kind of uncomfortable doing it, but we're doing it anyway. Like, have you shared that sentiment with your teams? Like, Becky, you said we're all babies, the muskrats in a trench coat. I mean, I love that. But if that's, are you messaging that way to teams saying, like, look, this is hard for me too? How are you handling that?
Yeah. I mean, when it first really started and I added ChatGPT to my phone before I ever accessed it on a computer. For me, for some reason, that felt like less invasive. Even though I guess objectively that's more invasive. But for me, as soon as I started using it, I thought, I'm gonna have to go back to school. I need a new job. Like, this is going to take my job. And yeah, as a team, we've sat down and discussed it, and we got it all out there. The fears, the skepticism, the worry, am I going to be employed in 5 years when this just gets better? And then we kind of had to decide, like, we're either going to keep up with the times or we're going to get left behind. And we're going to figure out ways that we can utilize it and use it as a tool rather than being like allowing ourselves to be replaced.
Yeah, I love that view.
Yeah,
Kate,
very
any other thoughts?
similar experience to Becky, actually. And I would say that we'll get into this more, but this is not the first time that we've had this feeling with the change in technology in our industry. Like, my job has significantly changed just in my tenure over the last 10 years. And this is the new one, but it's the way I view AI now is very different to my initial fears as I've kind of worked through it and we've talked about it as a team. This is propelling us forward, and it's allowing us time for things we didn't have before, which is the same case with when, technologies like responsive came around the block and we've changed. I don't spend 8 hours formatting anymore and things like that. There's been huge evolutions in this job before. It is really intimidating at first. And then when you start to see what it can do for you, I firmly believe that we are going to stay ahead of AI as people, and it's going to propel innovation, not just in proposals management, but everywhere. And so I think we're on the side now after implementing it, seeing where it is, how it's evolving, that it's just going to move us forward. So yeah.
Yeah. I think there's certainly an element of just get in there and do it. And even if it's like helping with your meal preparation for the week or something, I think just like experiencing the power of it in any context can be really disarming, because you don't know what you don't know if you haven't actually gotten in there and tried it. And I think a lot of what you're saying, both of you, is really, I think it comes back to mindset and kind of reframing that. I saw some comments in chat. Chat is very lively. I can't keep up with you all right now, so we'll work on that. But you know, there is a comment that said, you know, using AI, it can feel, people will think we're cheating. But you know, I think that's a real, it's, are we cheating? Are we going to be replaced? Like, it's very easy to go like doom, gloom, worry on this stuff. But then if you turn it around and say, this is an opportunity and it's a new muscle we're building in the team, we're all in this together. I know there was a session earlier around kind of generational differences. I think what's really interesting about AI is the way, you know, you mentioned you have a lot of different roles on your teams, right? The way you're using it as a leader versus an entry-level position, a knowledge manager, versus, you know, a bid coordinator or something like that. Like, it's going to be different. And actually pooling that knowledge and talking about it helps kind of lift everyone up and understand that we are all constantly learning. We're all evolving. We're all in this together. And then it starts to become more about the art of the possible, what's working, what's not. And at the end of the day, like, this is change management. It's just change management on steroids, because this whole movement is, you know, it's like moving at the pace of like an Indy 500 racetrack. I don't even know, I don't even have the right analogy, like warp speed, right? And so I think some of it in what I'm hearing from all of you is like how there is definitely mindset and messaging, and modeling, I think, from leaders like yourselves that will really kind of shift the paradigm, for your teams. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how you're embracing AI. Would love to get your thoughts on how AI is shifting the role of proposal teams. This doesn't have to be limited to your organizations, but just more broadly for the whole profession. What do you see, or what do you predict?
Yeah, so I think Becky alluded to it a little bit earlier, that things are shifting pretty rapidly. And I think for us, this is like a long line of changes in what this role is doing. And it's drafting is less of the job now, but you still need to have the knowledge to be able to validate responses and craft them, make them more specific to your prospective customers. And so we're looking at like, how do we scale this incredible skill set? And that's kind of reduced a bit of the fear on my team, is like, you know, validating that the skills that we've built, they're not going away. They're needed now more than ever. AI can't replace the knowledge that we have and the expertise and the strategic thinking behind a lot of my team members. So we're offsetting, you know, a lot of the things that people didn't love, to be frank. So getting to that initial first draft is a bit easier, doing some of the research and allowing them to focus on, you know, value. And yeah, I think the junior roles are changing probably most rapidly on my team, where it's more technical in nature, leveraging technology, doing some research, setting up projects, doing some of the administrative side, and then learning about our product and our company at the same time.
Yeah, we're fairly similar. I mean, with AI, I think our team has moved away from question answers and compliance managers, especially in the federal or government space, to a more strategic position. AI is able to do a first pass, but that leaves a lot of time for our team to be more thoughtful, to be more strategic, and customizing responses with a more use case specific response rather than boilerplate, because there's no time in a 700 question questionnaire to be more thoughtful. Well, now there is. Additionally, I don't know if it's really, it's changed again, like Kate said, where it is most drastically impacting the role in junior positions. It's giving them more of an administrative role, rather than kind of throwing them into the fire, which is what we used to do. It's giving them more time to learn and up their skill set to that of more senior proposal managers. So yeah, very similar.
Yeah, so on that note, how it sounds like you are seeing differences in positions, responsibilities, et cetera. How would you say if and I think you've sort of said this already, but it's sort of like, how does the entry role of the future compare with the entry role even 2 years ago? I've heard like it's more technical, et cetera. And also, do you see it limited to just entry level positions or more broadly?
I think no, like the expectation and I mean the value in leveraging AI in different ways can be found at any different level. I think it's just what Becky and I are saying is a lot of the time we had our junior team members, and I'll speak on my side first, is they would be working on more templated responses, doing a lot of copy and pasting, getting that first draft ready, and then a more senior bid manager would come in and review the responses, apply the strategic messaging, thread win themes, do a lot of the relationship building with the different bid team members as well, and keep us on track, those elements. So it's different now for our junior team members. They don't necessarily have to spend as much time on that first draft pass because AI can help us do that. And where I've found the real benefit is like AI's ability to kind of infer similarities between keywords in a way that a simple keyword search wouldn't have been able to do in the past. So it can leverage that knowledge and get a better, more accurate answer and combine responses in a better way. So what I'm looking for now is like, how are their organizational skills? What's their technical acumen? Can they leverage different technologies and tool sets that we have across our business? Things like that. And then what is their desire and how can we work them up to the more strategic thinking that our bid writers and bid managers have who've been around for a while. And then at that level, it's leveraging AI for things like research on our prospects, tool sets for, templates and things like that, so they don't have to think about, how they would position emails to their even internal team and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Becky.
I want to just caveat, like there is still absolutely a place for more junior team members. It's just kind of a difference in the role and responsibilities. There's fairly regular roles and documented as like proposal coordinators versus proposal managers versus proposal writers, etc. It's just that things have changed due to technology, but technology has always changed our jobs. When I started as a proposal writer a million years ago, I spent half of my day proofing, copy editing, reading in 200-page documents. As soon as tools like Grammarly came out and it was so prevalent, that changed my job. It went from an hours-long process to 10 minutes. And I think we just have to kind of embrace those things as they change and think, well, what does it mean now? What are other things that can be streamlined? And then leveraging those more junior roles for things like that. So yes, it's kind of changed to not people who are, necessarily perfect at copy editing, but what is their technical acumen and things like that? What are their capabilities on that front rather than just focusing on the things that we can leverage our tools for?
Yeah, I think, actually a lot of what you're saying to me, it smells like opportunity. If I'm a person who's just starting my career in bid and proposal management, what I'm hearing from you both is, yes, there's a different, skill set acumen required, but you might be able to get that person into, more strategic senior role faster because they're not, collating binders or what have you. It's actually more of this broader organizational interface. Um, and in many ways, I think, maybe that makes the career itself more appealing. I don't profess to have been a proposal manager myself, but in, hearing from a lot of our customers, it's always fun for me to hear stories of how people landed in this profession. And oftentimes what I hear is like, it was a total accident. Um, but I think the role is so unique and multifaceted that you're actually maybe able to expose like the good stuff faster because of the way that the role is evolving, and then really be more thoughtful about career pathing and taking on different roles as they grow in the organization. So that was my spin on it for what it's worth. Um, okay, so I think, we talked about how it's evolving roles on your team, how you're using it. And I think too, there's this sentiment, just to pause on this for a moment, where it's kind of understood that you need to be smart enough to not only use AI, but also, to check its work. Um, when you think about that and just think about the broader landscape, we've talked about a lot about what's changing, like what doesn't change in this evolution?
Sorry, did you say what does it or doesn't it?
What doesn't? So we've talked a lot about like what's evolving, but are there things that you're like, what, AI or whatever new technology is thrown our way, like these things are still fundamental that we need to, kind of hold near and dear to the profession?
So, I wouldn't say what's not changing, but what are the things that maybe have been not at the forefront? What are the things that we haven't been able to focus on due to just how difficult this job is, and getting something out the door. And those are the things I think now are becoming the most fun, and those are things like interpersonal skills, soft skills, and even things that are hard skills that we can now focus on, if that's product expertise or services expertise of the things you're selling, now that you can spend more time investigating these things. Strategic messaging, that's something many members on my team have never had the opportunity to really go all in on, because their heads are in the sand, getting these questions answered, getting executive summaries researched, and the research aspects and the compliance aspects. But now they have an opportunity to kind of step back and say, what gaps have I not been able to fill because I'm spending so much time doing something that now can be done fairly quickly?
Yeah, I would completely echo that, Becky. I think, what's remained fairly consistent through our profession is that, there is a request and we do a response, and a lot of similar steps throughout the process that remain the same, with drafting, with reviewing, going through compliance checks, and then, submission, et cetera. And then there's meetings, lots of things that will never go away. That will never, I don't think, change. Maybe, don't quote me on this in 15 years, guys. But it's like dramatically changed where our effort is going. So we can unlock a lot of potential in our team. And I'm curious to know if other teams and other people on this call have had the same experience. Like, a big challenge for us has been just volume and getting through the number of requirements, requests, all of these things. And so what we found is that, offloading some of those things that are don't need the human element as much, that are repeatable tasks, saves, like, that was where an unconscionable amount of time was going. And so it does allow for us to flex other muscles, really bring a strategic focus and a value-based approach to our responses in a way that, you just don't have time for, if you're not leveraging technology to support you.
I'm just going to hop back in and say something you said really reminded me of something that I've found just infinitely ironic on the idea of like workload and time. Being in tech myself, AI has increased our workload because of AI. So now we're dealing with questionnaires about AI. And so it's both adding to our workload, but we're able to leverage this to reduce the time spent doing it, if that makes sense. And I kind of find that just so funny.
We have seen the same, tech company here, right? We have seen the same thing with our strategic response team, where they're saying, well, and just our sales team, right? More customers have steering committees that they're going to, because everyone wants to feel really good about the investment that they're making in AI, and we have AI in our product in many facets across the platform, and they want to be able to trust it. I saw a comment earlier in the chat around, I think it was really alluding to kind of, oh yeah, AI captures your firm's information and becomes public to competitors. So not the case for all AI. Now, if you're not careful with something like ChatGPT, that is a risk. I've talked to customers who actually have tools in place working with their CIO to catch when company IP will get out the door, which I think is really smart, because there's definitely a shadow IT problem. But something like responsive, that's all contained in the platform. You have full control over that. It's not getting out. That's why everyone wants to go to a steering committee to make sure and fill out these AI questionnaires to make sure the investment is sound, et cetera. So yeah, I definitely hear you. I was following, it's all very meta. Like, we use AI, we have to answer more questions about AI. It's, and it helps us answer the questionnaires. Like, that's certainly, for anyone out there who's working in tech, can probably relate to that. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Someone just put in the chat that there are more questions because AI is also writing them. So it's, it is in this feedback loop of more, but it's all based on the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that's where we can go next, because we've talked a lot about the roles, how they're evolving, and again, I think it does, smell of opportunity, so to speak. Like, people can be more strategic, et cetera, connected. And I always like to say, it's hard to teach strategy and it's hard to teach like relationship building, but I think those are also the things that people ultimately like to do more than, answering 700 questions in a first pass. And that 0 to 1 is really hard too, like staring down a blank sheet of paper, right? So actually being able to come in and edit and refine, and think at a higher level is great. So anyway, we talked about the roles, all of that. But yeah, there's this piece around how AI has really shifted the proposal process generally. So it's what you noted in chat, Becky, like we might be getting more questions because AI is writing the questions. I saw some comments earlier around, hey, do you need to actually disclose if AI helped you write the answers? So I'd love to hear from you both on, the shifts you're seeing to just the proposal process generally, and to the extent that you can hit on some of the things that folks are asking about disclosures or the additional questions, et cetera. I think that would be really helpful just to understand what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think also being in tech, there's a lot of questions that we're getting about AI. So that's added to our workload for sure. But I think for sure, people are using AI to generate what kinds of questions they have. So that's interesting. If we go into like what sorts of tools and stuff we're able to use, I think I touched on it a little bit in the beginning. Our organization has policy around what we can and can't use, and certainly public domain AI, not a place for company information, but it is a good place to research your prospective customers, and then also, offload things that take up time in my day and like mental load. So meal planning, grocery lists, a lot of things like that. Just personally, I use for. In terms of going back to your question, shifts in the job, I haven't seen much from prospective customers at this point doing like checks for AI responses. I anticipate that will be coming out just as it did, in academia as well. So that'll be coming. And certainly will probably change how we use it going forward. It's not a static experience. So Becky, I don't know what other
Seen
thoughts
the
you have.
disclosures yet, but you could see them coming in the future, I think.
Yeah, I could for sure. And I think a few chat members have noted that it's more common in the public sector, which, I don't not expect either. So
Regulated industries.
yeah.
They want more.
Yeah.
Becky, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we have seen it. It makes things interesting, but I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about using it thoughtfully, right? Like this is not, and I think most companies that either have, that are tech companies that also have AI in product, there are a lot of regulations because I think all of our customers expect a certain bar of safety when it comes to AI because it could be fairly problematic, especially when we're talking about things like proprietary information, client data. And that's why it's important that you're using it thoughtfully. And so using tools that aren't accessing the internet, accessing other things, what you're applying, what you're providing to the AI has to be thoughtful, and also using it for things that it doesn't need access to these things. Compliance matrices, doing an analysis, synthesizing 200 pages, getting first pass on publicly available information, things like that. We're using it intelligently. And then, but there is one thing we haven't really touched on that my team brought up last night to me is using it thoughtfully, but this does not mean you need to have it synthesize a 3-page proposal, because there is consequence but by using AI, there's a whole environmental impact every time you use it. And so it's being thoughtful and when you're using it and when it makes sense versus just using it for every single thing that comes across your desk or, every random idea that you might have. I think those are kind of the ways that I'm seeing it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think too that there are some things that, now if it's a 500-page RFP and you need to summarize and understand, do we even comply? You think you mentioned the compliance matrix. That's one instance. If it's a 3-page, that's different. There's the environmental impact. There's also like you can read 3 pages. Like it's okay to read 3 pages, and it's probably good to have that context if you're going to respond to it, right? Like if preparing for this discussion, if I just said summarize the guide, that doesn't make sense, right? Like we had to talk about, what we wanted to cover, et cetera. So it's definitely, I love that. Like it's not a blunt instrument. Like we have to be thoughtful about where, when, why we're using it. And, I think it's always great to remind ourselves that we still have a very real purpose on this earth and have brains. I'm being a little bit cheeky, but we all know the robot overlords are not going to take us over. We have a real role here. It's interesting. We talked about, yes, maybe you could see it coming, or Becky, you're already seeing it, some of these disclosures around using AI. I do want to go back because I'm seeing we still got a little bit of time left. I was reading some of the comments in chat. I'm looping back to the men versus women differences. And I wanted to share some of these where some folks are saying they're not seeing a difference. Some are saying men embraced AI more rapidly because they're sometimes not the best writers. So I had a little bit of a chuckle on that. And then I think there were some comments just around like, hey, I do feel like I'm cheating and, taking a shortcut, and it makes me feel like I'm not using my full potential. I think it's interesting to just understand the broader landscape of what folks are seeing. Do you have any advice broadly as you're thinking about, whether it's like we talked earlier, kind of junior versus senior roles, men versus women, like, do you think it needs to be more tailored in terms of how you're coaching your team to really kind of dive in and adopt, depending on role, depending on men, women, et cetera?
It's usually based on the individual, like, regardless of gender and age, like how somebody approaches the world is based on a whole bunch of different factors. Those are two that can, change things for people, but it's really about what that person's appetite is for change and embracing new technology. That's usually the common theme with a change like this. How have they reacted to the changes that we've had before? I think how long somebody's been in the profession can sometimes, have a bit of stickiness towards change, just because, as I talked about before, they've got something that's been really successful for them. And so it's uncomfortable to switch it up. But I think there is, the reality is that, we've got to take the leap forward and embrace what it's going to bring for us in a lot of different ways, and not so much focus on the things that's taking away. I hear people on that it feels like cheating because it feels like a lot, but when you start getting into use it more, I think that fear will kind of go away, or that feeling might go away a little bit, because of what you actually end up having to do to make it something that you're proud of at the end of the day in a proposal, because it gets you to maybe like step one. And there's so much thought that goes into it beyond that, that I think a lot of my team members, and I certainly have found quite empowering, that like, yeah, still way smarter than what it's putting out.
I
Absolutely.
agree with that completely. So that's sort of the soft side of it. That's the emotional aspect. For me as a manager, and through that lens, I also have to ensure that our skill set isn't lagging, especially keeping in mind the things like the AI disclosures. I need to ensure that my team is able to operate with or without AI. So for us, I have made a team policy that no one on the more junior side of things, or even new to our company, is able to use AI within their first 6 months. Our product has certifications. They have to get all of those certifications to have like intimate knowledge with our products, services, and capabilities, and they have to be able to articulate these things without using these tools in the event that anything changes, or there are these RFPs that say you cannot use AI to respond to this or to process this document. They need to be able to have the same skill sets of anyone who had to learn without these tools. And then from that point on, we still have our guardrails, but then you're free to leverage these things to increase your workload, be more efficient, but you still need to be able to do the job without it. I think my worst fear as a manager is for someone to leave my org or my team or our company and go to a new company as a proposal manager that has no idea how to proposal manage because they've only used AI. I want, being a manager means caring for the whole person, and that means making sure they have all of the skills that they need to excel, whether that's with me or that's at a different organization.
That is such an excellent point. I can't remember if it was you that brought this up as we were chatting a couple weeks ago, but I thought I remembered you saying something about, and it goes back to this point of like, you want people to be able to do the job without relying on it as a crutch, that when you're actually onboarding folks, you like don't let them use AI for a while. Did I remember that incorrectly, or is that?
They're all of their access is disabled.
That's so.
It can't be the beginning and ending of everything. We need to have an escape route, and you can't have that if you have this crutch. You need to be able to do the job.
And I think, adding on to what Becky's saying and why I think that's such a great approach, especially for new people, like you can't recognize where AI is falling down if you don't have the knowledge to back it up. So it's a must to have the foundations still. AI is great. It does a lot of wonderful things, but we're not even close to 50% there of like what our job is and what it entails. And you have to have the underlying skills to be able to support it. Technology can take us a long way, but you have to have the foundation to be able to use it properly as well.
But let me end with this, because this has been a really powerful discussion. I want to close out by having each of you share the single most important thing women can do starting today to enhance their careers with AI. I know there's probably more than one thing. Just pick your favorite. And Kate, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think if you haven't already, just dip your foot in and see what it can do for you, and really start with the things you enjoy the least in your day to day, because that's like gold. It's just to get time back on stuff you don't enjoy, and be able to spend the time doing the things you really do enjoy. So, research email templates, phrasing for certain things, like let it take that off your plate and dig into being, getting into the more thoughtful areas of your job.
To take that a step further, we've been given the gift of time with AI, and now is your time to start thinking, what is my why? What is the thing I want to, that I've been able to kind of generally touch on, that I want to expand on? Take that and start building your skill sets. Start, reaching for the stars, because it's attainable now that we have more time on our hands.
That is incredible. Thank you so much, Kate and Becky, for sharing all of your wisdom. I think there have been a lot of actionable tips, things that folks can do differently, think about differently, lean on each other for support as we all navigate this together. And whether you're just starting out in this profession or you're a seasoned leader, we are all in this together, and it has been such an honor to be able to have this conversation with you both today. Thank you to APMP for putting on this incredible event, and I hope folks enjoy the rest of the sessions today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Jennifer, Kate, and Becky, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us today.